Kenny Bunn was a complex and quirky young man. He'd suffered with his mental health after being abused as a child and had previously turned to drugs in an attempt to numb the pain. However, he turned his life around, he became sober, even falling in love with a girl called Nadya. He thought he'd found the one, but little did he know that his love for her would bring about his demise. A love triangle turned deadly. This is the murder of Kenny Bunn. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me. If you're new here, I release my content on a Wednesday and a Sunday religiously. It's always crime-based. If you like crime and consistency, this is definitely the channel for you. Hello to everybody coming back to my channel. Without you, I can't make this. Same for those of you supporting me on Patreon and also YouTube membership. Without you, I can't make this content. Hopefully today's won't disappoint. It is one that, as ever, leaves you just shaking your head. Kenny Bunn was somebody that, to all intents and purposes, like so many of the cases I cover, should just be an individual walking around, getting his life in order, falling in love, falling out of love, and going through the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as we say. But he isn't. And he isn't essentially, in my opinion, because of ego. And also, one could say, a follager of two individuals who met that arguably, once together, became murderous. Let's talk about Kenneth Eugene Bunn. So first of all, Kenneth preferred to be called Kenny. We all know that we have preferences for particular names, and certainly Kenneth versus Kenny. Well, Kenny's more modern, so we can understand that a younger guy is going to want to stand out in a way that's a bit more fashionable, a little bit more modern than traditional. He was born on the 14th of June, 1992 in Georgia. He was born to Trenna Wilson and Jeff Bunn, but he lived with his grandmother, Pat Colvard, who he actually called Meow. I genuinely am of an era where grandparents would just call grandma or granddad or grandmother or grandfather, but in our modern era, there are lots of different names that are used. I suppose I do tell a lie. I did have one friend when I was growing up who called her grandma Mummy May, but I didn't really get it back then. These days, I understand loads of people have nicknames for their grandparents, and my own sister, one of the grandparents there, is called a Gigi. Like I said, I didn't understand it, but I appreciate that in the modern world, lots of different nicknames are used to describe terms of endearment. But Meow is just such a lovely term. And she said he was Meow's boy. So clearly a really close relationship. Now, one of the things that he'd endured, which was awful when he was growing up, is that he had been abused by one of his mother's ex-boyfriends when he was young. And understandably, this had caused him a huge amount of trauma. And I think sometimes when we talk about sexual abuse, we talk about the action, we understand what's happened, we're horrified by the reality of the fact that children endure this, and children too often endure SA. But we don't necessarily dig deep into what we're talking about when we think about the ramifications, implications, and long-term issues that are associated with being a victim of this. When a child has their whole world disintegrated by another human being, often a human being that's trusted to the family, meaning that they have direct access to the child on a regular basis. And when that individual often uses coercion, threat, and makes the child feel also culpable and responsible for the actions that they have towards them, it destabilizes everything about the child's sense of security, psyche, and general sense of safety in a world that was once safe. And fundamentally, it makes you question everything you are as you grow up. because you've often been led to believe a series of lies about yourself because the abuser wants to make you feel that you have absolutely no power over your situation. So you believe that you're responsible for it. You believe terrible things will happen if you talk about it. You believe that you wanted it. There are all these themes that are deeply confusing and quite devastating on a psychological level. And as you move through the ages and you come to a point where you start to have sexual feelings, often it can be a point of absolute trauma because you have these sexual feelings towards other human beings, and then it relates back to the trauma that you'd experienced as a young person. And it's confusing because now you want to have those feelings, but they're dirty and bad and so on and so forth. And I'm only just scratching the surface of what SA does to children who endure it. So whilst we talk about it in sentences, what we're talking about ramification wise is for a lifetime. And obviously, Kenny experiences these kind of feelings growing up. They caused him a huge amount of distress, a huge amount of trauma. It led to mental health issues. I would say that the vast majority of people who are survivors of child abuse do have mental health struggles. They are certainly ones that are overcome on the whole, but nonetheless, it is almost impossible to not leave those experiences without some serious mental scar tissue. So for Kenny, this took the form of anxiety. He was also somebody who was very depressed at times, and he also suffered from suicidal ideation. Now, of course, we can't pinpoint the abuse purely and say this is the reason and this is the reason alone. We can also understand that as we move through the ages, life can be difficult growing up. You find it challenging at times to connect with peers. You go through so many stages and changes physically, hormonally, physiologically. You're also dealing with the educational pressures and relational pressures. So it's a cooking pot of possibility as for problems in your life going through the ages from being a child to an adolescent and indeed into a young adult. But in spite of the fact that he had these battles, so to speak, he still had a relatively good relationship with his mother. So even though he could have felt let down by her, even though he was somebody who had obviously been displaced because of the abuse, he still got on well with her. And she did often try to help him because she wanted to make sure that when he was dealing with those depressive episodes, he felt cradled. So in spite of there being a level of dysfunction and certainly a level of abuse in his life, it does seem that those strong connections existed, certainly with grandma and with mum. And so he was somebody who was deeply loved. But we all know that just because we're really well loved doesn't make us feel safe from our own mental health. Now, one of the things that people talk about when they discuss Kenny is he's an introvert. So he was described as being quite shy, quite quiet, and quite withdrawn. And I think what we were also talking about there is somebody who's probably a little bit socially anxious. There is quite a big difference between introversion, which is somebody who's quite happy to be by themselves. They don't necessarily psychologically require people to have lots of energy around them. Often they're quite at peace by themselves. So when people talk about introversion, often people will look at that and think that it's a negative trait, but it isn't. In fact, what we find about introverts is they're often very deep thinkers, very sensitive individuals to other people's needs, and they're very good at being logical and considerate of the world around them and the people that need help within the world around them. But they aren't necessarily the kind of people who are going to be out there dancing, singing, playing, and being loud, which is more typical of an extrovert. And an extrovert, contrary to what a lot of people think, isn't necessarily confident. They draw on the energy of those around them and reflect it. Often there's a sense of inferiority and insecurity around being an extrovert, which is why you act in a way that makes other people at ease. So when we talk about introversion, I think people have an idea that if you're an introvert, potentially there's depression associated, and that just isn't true. However, if you are somebody who's maybe got social anxiety and you are the kind of person who withdraws, that's more likely to do with the fact that you're not in a good mental state. So he didn't enjoy social engagements. He did keep himself to himself. And part of that is because of that social anxiety, without a doubt. But also the other side of it is he just didn't feel like he fitted in. Again, going through your teenage years, many people feel like they're on the outside looking in. Many people feel that they're looking at other people who seem to just be enjoying the moment and the presence of that moment. And they're looking enviable at that human being and thinking, why can't I do that? Why can't I just let go and connect in the way that person is. Of course, what you have no idea of is whether that person is feeling that way at all. Often that person is acting in accordance with the situation and seeming to fit in and seeming to enjoy the present moment. But they too are dealing with our own struggles as a human being. But our perception is everything. And our feelings are a really bad guide. If the world ran on the way that we feel, then we would be in a shambles and chaos, because everybody has a different feeling. Everybody has feelings that are completely subjective to them. And often that means we misread situations. So he feels like he doesn't fit in and probably thinks other people feel that they do. But the chances are many of the people around him are also struggling. So he's amplifying these feelings lightly down to his anxiety. One of his friends, Rachel, actually talked about the fact that when he was around new people, he just kind of closed down. He had a real lack of social skills. But again, when you are socially awkward and anxious because you don't have the confidence level and you don't necessarily feel that you're fitting in, and you maybe are really harsh towards yourself, believing that you should be better, when you're carrying that kind of burden and baggage, it's really hard to relax, particularly when you're meeting new people. He was also a goth. I was a goth as well. I'm still a recovering goth. That's why my eyeliner is like this. But when you're a goth, you have a kind of outfit. So you'll dress in dark clothes, you'll wear dark eyeliner, often have your hair dyed black, and the music taste will reflect that as well. So he, in particular, liked metal music and dark poetry. And in his early adulthood, he actually did begin to experiment with drugs. But again, as you go into your young adulthood, you're often looking at figuring out ways where you can fit in. And the thing about drugs and alcohol is often it's an easy route to get rid of some of those inhibitions, to connect with people who are like-minded in that space, and to just relax a little bit. And very often that's the gateway as to why people start to have issues with drugs. It's not because they are actively seeking to escape even, it's that they're actively seeking to connect. And at the same time to anesthetize some of those anxieties and feelings that prevent that kind of connection with other human beings. So it's likely that he's dealing with the drug situation as some kind of respite and an attempt to self-medicate the demons that he's had in his past, and also to create a bridge to other people who are also doing these drugs and taking alcohol, for example. It just gives you a common connection. And when you look statistically, it is quite common for people who've had mental health issues to actually attempt to self-medicate with drugs. And I will also acknowledge, because some people who are watching this will be watching in other countries where, for example, cannabis is used for depression treatment, that there are certain illegal drugs in the UK and certainly around the world that potentially have better outcomes than the antidepressants that they give out, like Smarties. So I'm not going to throw it away that the self-medication with certain drugs can't be an effective process for certain people. I'm just saying that it's very likely that he's using these kind of drugs to just soften the blows that he's been dealt with on a mental health level and on a memory level with the trauma that he's endured because of the sexual abuse. Now, by 2019, Kenny's getting it together. He's trying to turn his life around. He's stopped using drugs. He's really committed to sobriety, and he's making moves forward in his life. And of course, just like any young person on the whole, it doesn't matter what you've been through, it doesn't matter the challenges you faced. What tends to lie at the root of desire for most people is connection, a sense of possibilities, a sense of hope in who we might connect with. And it happens for him in October 2019. He meets a girl called Nadya Swartz. He met her online and he begins dating. And people who knew him said he was literally smitten from the get-go. Bear in mind, this is somebody who hasn't had a lot of experience with girls, obviously has felt very socially awkward, has struggled to connect with new people, and suddenly he's getting his life together, he's moving forward with the sobriety, and boom, he's met Nadya. And they had a lot of similar values, similar styles, they had a lot of common interests. I would say that a notable difference between them, though, is that she's only 20 years of age and he's actually 27 at the time. Some people will say, well, a 20-year-old girl is going to be equally as mature as a 27-year-old man. But From what I've researched, most people do say that she was actually somebody who was relatively immature for her age. So she's not one of those girls who appears worldly wise. She was somebody who was considered quite emotionally immature, and actually immature just on a personality level. Equally, Kenny would probably find that quite alluring, because Kenny isn't somebody with a huge amount of confidence. He's not somebody with a huge amount of experience. So finding a 20-year-old who's a little bit more naive, a little bit more innocent, a little bit more vulnerable even, that would be an alluring quality, because she isn't going to be demanding or overbearing, at least not initially as far as he would be concerned. And that would draw him in. It's likely, because he's 27 and because of what we know about Kenny, that he's probably looking for something more serious than maybe a 20-year-old could give him. Think about the fact that at 20, you're probably going to have several more relationships before you end up with Mr. Right. And think about the fact that as a human being, Kenny is a relatively serious individual. So he is probably thinking this could go long term. She may be indeed in a completely different headspace. And it only takes a few months before Nadya ends the relationship with Kenny. And one of the reasons that she gives is that he constantly needs reassurance. Also, apparently, he's quite a sensitive person. And because of what's happened to him in the past, we can imagine that he will have some issues of trust. We can imagine that on a sexual level, there are probably some real fractures there because of the SA. And truth be told, some people get into relationships with individuals with a level of burden and don't want to continue because it's too serious, it's too much hassle to manage them, as opposed to understanding that you need to get past some of those trust issues to a point where that person is able to fully engage and fully trust. And then you end up with an incredibly loyal, incredibly loving, and incredibly long-term partner who is going to want to be with you come hell or high water because of the connection that you've made with them and the fact that you've seen through your relationship with them. But in spite of the fact that the two have now broken up, they do still continue to communicate. And apparently they were all on good terms despite the breakup. And I would imagine the reason for that is that he still wants to be with her. Let's be honest. Let's just throw it out there. If you're the person who's broken up with somebody, you're always going to feel a bit bad about it if you've got any level of conscience whatsoever. So if that person is like, yeah, we can be friends, and then you see them at the pub or you go out shopping in there and you can be dead nice to each other, well, that makes it easier. It makes it easier on a social level. It makes it easier on an emotional level, and psychologically, as the person who's broken up with that individual, you're not dealing with the pain. You're not going through a grief process. You're just like happy to believe that that person's okay. But the strong likelihood is that the person on the receiving end of the breakup, particularly when they're completely smitten with you, is desperate to get back with you and therefore to remain on good terms in the hope, future-wise, that one day you'll realise the error of your ways and return to them. So I would imagine that Kenny wanted her back to some degree, and I know that one of Kenny's friends believed that he still had strong feelings for Nadya. It tends to be the way when a couple break up that early on. One will think it's going great guns, the other one will be like, I'm looking for something different. But the likelihood is he wanted to repair the relationship and he was giving her some time. Now, in spite of the fact that the suspicion is Kenny wanted the relationship back, people who knew the couple when they were together said, listen, this was one toxic relationship. And what they actually went on to say is that Nadya was a toxic person. At 20, it's very possible to be somebody who exhibits toxic traits and you will change by the age of 30, genuinely. I say that because I think we forget that at 20, we are nowhere near the person we are at 30. When we're 20, we don't have the same amount of responsibilities, we don't have the same amount of experience, we certainly won't have the same level of conscience as we will 10 years down the line. And because of that, we can ultimately act in ways that on reflection, when we're older, seem completely unreasonable. Even hysterical. We see that with young relationships. Often there'll be a high level of conflict, and yet when they get married down the line, they have a really peaceful relationship because you act in ways that are very childlike. You're still relatively a child at 20. So even though people are saying that she was a toxic person, she could just be considered a young person with an emotional immaturity. However, bear in mind, in spite of the fact that there was toxicity apparently in the relationship, that wasn't how Kenny felt about it. He wanted to be loved. That's why he wanted her in his life. And people said one of the things that was really clear about Kenny was he had an absolute desire to be in love with the concept of being in love. It wasn't necessarily that the love had to be good, it was that it had to exist, that there were possibilities, potentials for him to end up in a relationship with somebody who reflected meaning. And she was somebody he developed strong feelings for, so she became the pinpoint of that possibility. We get to March the 16th, 2020, a 911 call is received around 4 p.m. The reason that that call has come in is because the body of a man has been discovered on an embankment near the Conestoga River in Georgia by 4 fishermen. Now, the Murray County officers who attend the scene, they realise straight away this is a murder scene. This person hasn't deceased because they've been out in the elements. They've not deceased because they've had a drug overdose. They're deceased because they have been shot 4 times in the head and the chest. So let's be honest, this is not a suicide. They can tell straight away. That's ruled out immediately. And also, somebody who's shot 4 times in the head and chest, that is making sure the person is dead. This isn't a case of getting into an altercation and the gun going off. This is about a cold-blooded execution. It's as simple as that. Now, at the stage that they are looking at the body, the first thing that they're struggling with is they cannot identify him. He's not got any phone on him. He doesn't have any belongings. Essentially, he's a John Doe at this moment in time. Witnesses who are questioned around the area, they say, you know what, we definitely heard gunshots. About 9:20 p.m. the night before, they could remember that that had occurred and it had really stood out for them. Now later this same day, Kenny's grandmother, Mima, she reports Kenny is missing. So Pat has noted that he hasn't come home. She'd last seen him the evening before at 7:45 p.m. He'd left to go to the shops. Now, he hadn't come home. Obviously, he's a young man. He has the opportunity to go and stay out. That's something that we see play out often in lives of young people growing up. They spend time with their friends, they have a drink, they stay over. But even though she hadn't been too worried when he hadn't returned, she does start to worry when she hears these reports coming through, that this unidentified body's being discovered. And there's that intuition, there's that instinct with certain people, isn't it? Because, you know, we hear about people going missing all the time and bodies turning up all the time. And even if somebody we love isn't present, we very unusually think, well, that'll be them. But there was clearly something that just provoked that reaction. Maybe it was that indelible link that she has with him, both in life and indeed in death. But for whatever reason, she gets in contact with the authorities and says, I'm really worried that this could be Kenny. So the police obviously want to figure out whether this is the case, and they go and visit Pat, and after they look at a picture of Kenny, and also after they hear the description of the clothes and the glasses that he'd been wearing the night before, they were absolutely positive that they had identified the victim. And one can only begin to imagine how the family felt. I've seen interviews and they are absolutely devastated by this reality. It's inconceivable that you can say goodbye at 7:45 on an evening as somebody is just going to the shops, and the next time you are seeing them, if ever again, is in a morgue with bullet wounds in their chest and head. That's what happened to Trenna, his mum, and to Pat, his gran. His mum, who had to actually confirm that the body was Kenny's, did so and had to actually cope with going identifying him that way. One cannot even begin to imagine how that would stay in her conscience forever. Pat also actually spoke to the police about the night before when she'd seen him, because clearly she suggested he'd been to the shop, but she also recalled that Nadya, their ex-girlfriend, had actually called round to her home looking for Kenny that same evening. So she wonders whether there's some kind of connection there. Maybe Nadya knows something that Pat doesn't know. So the police begin their investigation essentially by retracing Kenny's steps. So they go to the shop that Kenny had gone to the night before his body was found, and indeed they find CCTV footage, and it shows that he's talking to Nadya at the petrol station, which is outside the convenience store. Then, after he's had a conversation with her, he actually gets into her car and she drives off. So Nadya, to some degree, is seeming at this point like a likely suspect, or at least a person of interest, shall we say, because she's likely the last person who'd seen him alive. And we always know what that comes across like. If you are the last person to see somebody alive, then statistically you are way more likely to be the reason that person was last seen alive as well. Often they are the individuals who've carried out the killings. So they interview Nadya, and she says, yeah, absolutely. I met with Kenny the night he was killed. Actually, we did even have an altercation. We were arguing when we were in the car, and the reason that we were arguing is because that Kenny had actually asked me to drop him off at one of his friends' houses to buy marijuana. And he's a recovering addict, so I just wasn't okay with that. So because I refused to do what he wanted, we got into an argument, and Kenny just got out of my car. I don't know where he went after that, but this is ultimately what played out. So she's saying, yeah, you know, absolutely, I was the last person to see him as far as you're concerned because of the CCTV, but actually he had stormed off of his own volition to go and score drugs, something that I don't agree with because I know that he's a recovering addict. Now, the problem with that story is that Kenny wasn't taking drugs. He was actually trying really hard to remain sober and to not use them. And so this distortion of what everybody else sees of reality makes them suspect Nadya even more. But equally, they don't actually have any evidence to disprove Nadya's story or even to place her at the murder scene. So after the interview, she is released because there's nothing that they can hold her with. But it comes to light that not long after she's broken up with Kenny, Nadya's ended up in another relationship pretty immediately. So she starts dating a 20-year-old man called Swartz Hooker. In fact, they had got together quite intensely and they were actually living together at this point. And apparently Justin, much like Kenny, was very much in love with Nadya. And apparently this had caused conflict. So there had been clashes between Justin and Kenny in the past. They both harboured a huge amount of jealousy towards one another. Justin genuinely didn't like the fact that Nadya kept in contact with Kenny after the breakup. And of course, he saw Nadya's ex as a threat to their new relationship. And I do think that boundaries like this are appropriate a lot of the time when we're talking about new relationships. If you've been in a romantic relationship with somebody and then you start in a relationship with somebody else, and let's say there's not been a really long-term friendship before you got together with the original partner, one that means your history is so shared that not speaking would cause a real fracture in your life and happiness. But Kenny and her only dated for a few months, so there's nothing really strong there. She's now with somebody else. It's kind of etiquette to say goodbye to the ex because, like I said, there's not been a long history, and also it can prevent those very, very conflictual scenarios escalating when jealousy comes into play. And clearly Justin feels, well, if she's in contact with Kenny, there's a possibility they could get back together, and that's going to make him feel insecure. But Nadya keeps in contact with Kenny, so she's got the power here. She's the one who could walk away from Kenny. Equally, she's the one who could say to Justin, I don't want to be in a relationship with you because you're a jealous type and I'm not interested. But to keep them both hanging on, where Kenny's hopeful potentially that one day she'll get back with him, and Justin's hopeful that their relationship's going to work and doesn't want anybody interfering, i.e. Kenny, and that's a real pot of problems that doesn't need to exist. Justin had gone so far within this jealousy as to actually threaten to kill Kenny on at least one occasion. In fact, he specifically said, look, I'm going to blow your head off if you don't leave Nadya alone. And I would say, well, what the hell was Nadya saying was going on between her and Kenny? Because the intonation in that is that Kenny is harassing Nadya to such a degree that Justin will need to blow his head off. And yet, from what we know about Kenny, is he wasn't harassing anybody. It wasn't in his nature whatsoever to harass anybody. And if Nadya is the one keeping in contact with Kenny, she is the one promoting their friendship and relationship, not Kenny. And she is the one in a relationship, meaning that she should have the good grace to withdraw from Kenny and to stop causing problems for him in the eyes of Justin by committing to her partner who she's living with, in this case, Justin. But if you enjoy it, if you enjoy people fighting over you, if you get a thrill of seeing two men wanting you, then that can be quite alluring for particular individuals. You know, if you've got quite a dark personality, if you're somebody who wants to be seen as something really special, let's say you've got a touch of the narcissistic traits around you, then you are going to love people hurting one another if it means that they're hurting one another because they want you and that they're willing to fight for you. And people who knew Nadya said the one thing that she seemed to really enjoy was to just manipulate both of those men into disliking one another. So to take the fracture and to fracture it further, to pump the conflict bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, we get to a point where these kind of things can explode. The police now are interested in Justin. Of course, he's the kind of person with a motive. He hates Kenny. He's threatened to blow Kenny's head off, and now Kenny's ended up in that situation dead. So they speak to him, and he actually provides an alibi for the night that Kenny was killed. He says, listen, I couldn't have done it. I was visiting my family. So despite a possible motive, we could say, the investigation at that point had essentially reached a halt. However, then they get contacted by an attorney. And that attorney says, I've got some information that a client of mine needs to share that they believe will be helpful in the case of Kenny's murder. At this point, it's revealed to the authorities that the informant who'd gone through the attorney was actually a relative of Justin. And this relative had actually sold a gun to Justin on March the 14th, which would mean that Justin could indeed have been armed and dangerous, and moreover, could have committed a murder. He had access to a weapon. So this informant is obviously super concerned that the gun that they had sold Justin could have been used to kill Kenny. And apparently the attorney's client said, I asked him, I said, so did you fucking do it? Was it with my fucking gun, dude? And he said, don't worry. And I said, was it with my goddamn gun? And he said, yeah. So that informant has the good sense to think, I don't want a gun that I used to own being implicated in a murder and them coming for me. You know, there's no leads in this case, but then they find the gun and the gun happens to be mine. Obviously, if they find a weapon that belonged to you and can pinpoint some kind of forensic detail to you, well, if you don't have a good alibi around you to say where you were that day at that time that the murder occurred, you could well find yourself in a court of law, hoping to God that a jury finds some reasonable doubt with a circumstantial evidence case. So this informant has obviously thought about this and just gone ahead and spoken to the police through an attorney to protect themselves, and rightly so. Now, on top of this, there's another break in the case. This is when the police diligently go through and look at the alibis. So Justin said, look, I was with family. But unfortunately, it didn't check out. Turns out he hadn't been with his family on the night of the murder. Isn't it interesting how people will throw these alibis out? And what they perceive is that because their family members are family members, that they will back them up. So often you'll see this happen. I was with my mum, I was with my sister, I was with my brother. And then it comes down to the police going and visiting those individuals. And those individuals are like, I'm not going to be done for perverting the course of justice. And also, why am I going to protect somebody who's a murderer? There will always be family members who will just back somebody up to the hill in spite of overwhelming evidence to try to protect them. But there are also quite the contrary. People who know that a crime has been committed and an individual perpetrator needs to be brought to justice. So they don't back him up. So now they have a very strong motive, jealousy. They're in a relationship together and he wants the person who was her ex out of the way, and also access to a weapon. And we know that nobody can account for where Justin was when Kenny was killed. So on the 19th of March 2020, police actually bring both Nadya and Justin into custody for further questioning. At this point, Nadya tells investigators that Kenny had actually been threatening her. Now, remind yourself of who Kenny is. He's this shy, withdrawn, retiring, quiet, not very confident young man who ideally would like to get back with Nadya in spite of her massive ego that would probably get in the way of any relationship being able to have enough space to survive and thrive, but that's by the by. So this is what she's painting a picture of. She's in a scenario now where she realises that potentially her story is already falling apart, so she needs to make Kenny out to be a brute. He's threatening me. He's desperate to have me back. I mean, we always know that on the whole, great relationships thrive when you threaten somebody to take you back, but this is what she's saying. She said that he's just desperate. Of course he is, because again, ego, isn't it? Oh, he's desperate to have me back. How could he not wish to have me back, and so on and so forth. And so she said that because he's threatening her, she then goes and tells Justin about this. And she also says, look, these threats are so bad that he's making me depressed. Kenny's making me go into a mental health decline. So this is the kind of story that she's putting across to Justin, who's already beside himself with jealousy regarding Kenny, who's already concerned about the fact that she may one day leave him for Kenny. And now suddenly she presents this opportunity, this window of opportunity where he will have a permission base to harm Kenny. Because after all, he wants to protect his girlfriend. After all, he doesn't want to be put in a position of threat. And that's what she's telling him. So she decides that the best thing that they can do is with Justin, Justin and Kenny can meet. So essentially they can get together. And the aim, of course, of this is so that Justin and Nadya can confront him about these alleged threats that have happened. But then she tells police after the three have got together and met, the conversation turned from a conversation into a conflict, with Kenny apparently saying, if you don't come back with me, I'm gonna kill you. So now there's a threat to kill. Kenny's literally threatening two people. Justin, because obviously it's his girlfriend, so he's being threatened by proxy, and Nadya, who's being told she's gonna be killed unless she does A, B, or C. Apparently at this point, he even starts to strangle Nadya, even though Justin is there. Just suddenly grabs Nadya by the throat, starts to throttle her. So just try to conjure that in your mind. We've got this shy, retiring Kenny, not really somebody who'd say boo to a goose, suddenly having not only the confidence to shout at Nadya, to intimidate her, to threaten her that if she doesn't go back with him, bad things are going to happen to her. In fact, he'll kill her. But then, even though Justin, a male partner, is stood there, he just lunges at Nadya and starts to strangle her. I mean, it's ludicrous. It makes absolutely no sense. And it would mean that Justin was completely free to attack Kenny whilst he was otherwise engaged with attacking Nadya, meaning that Kenny would be at risk. And clearly, Justin would react. It's his girlfriend who's being threatened and aggressed in this manner. But this is a story that she's putting across. So then Nadya said Justin had killed Kenny in her defence, saying that Justin freaked out and basically knew what he had to do to make sure she didn't die. Now, the investigators basically don't buy it. Of course they don't buy it. It makes no sense. And so the pair are both at this point charged with the murder of Kenny. And the reason they're both charged is because in Georgia, the law holds anyone who assists or encourages a crime, they're considered to be guilty of the same crime as the direct perpetrator, which some people feel is a little bit too strict, but I also think probably works as a very effective deterrent. So often this means that even if the person hasn't pulled the trigger, they get the same sentence anyway. So she is culpable, despite the fact that she didn't actually kill Kenny. Justin, on the other hand, well, he's just like, yeah, I didn't do any of it. He gets questioned. He's like, don't know any of it. Don't know any of it. It's all rubbish. Whatever she's saying, it's just not true. I've got nothing to do with the murder. What about the family member who you bought the gun off and then who you admitted you'd used it on Kenny to? Apart from saying that, I'm totally saying I didn't do it. I did say that I did specifically do it, and I did acknowledge that I used the gun that did it. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I don't care what that mad woman is saying in there. Like, I don't even like her anymore. I should have let Kenny go home with her, But basically, Justin's just going down no road of admitting it at all. But he does later confess to another inmate, and he says to that inmate, look, I did shoot Kenny, but I did it in self-defense. The police don't believe the stories. They don't believe for 1 minute that Kenny was the aggressor. For one thing, there was literally no indication that Nadya had been attacked. So if you're going to suggest that somebody has just lunged forward and throttled you, well, you're going to have some marks on your neck. You're probably going to find that they'll have scratches on their hands and wrists because you'll be trying to claw them off from killing you. And so there's no indication whatsoever that she was attacked. And there's no wounds on her neck. There's no wounds on Kenny that indicate that he was being given any defensive sort of wounds by her. And of course, the additionally sick layer to this accusation is that now Kenny is being, in the public domain, called a perpetrator, actually considered some kind of violent man. And Kenny's family and friends are literally horrified. They say he was never aggressive, he was never violent, and indeed there is absolutely nothing in his background whatsoever that would demonstrate he had the capacity to do what Nadya is suggesting he's done. His mother also said that, listen, there was abuse, I think, in the relationship, but let me tell you that abuse came from Nadya. She was very controlling, she was very manipulative, and I guess the mother is saying that she was quite Machiavellian in the way that she acted and operated around Kenny. And you just have to think about what played out. She's in a relationship with Kenny, it ends. That's it, it's over, move on. She does with Justin, but she likes the fact that Kenny wants her. She's not interested in Kenny. She just keeps him hanging on like a puppet master because she knows that he will do her will if she asks him to because he likes her. And she likes the validation. She likes being seen attractive by two men. And then on this side, you've got Justin, who is obviously falling in love with her. And she's manipulating him equally. She is making him afraid and insecure. And she's doing this with the knowledge that she's doing this. Ultimately, the only reason that Justin will have gone with her to meet Kenny is because he's believed her lies. He's believing what she's telling him. Equally, Kenny is believing what she's telling him. So she creates the perfect storm. She loads the gun 100%, even though she may not have pulled the trigger. And now she's deriding his memory. She's trying to make out that he is actually a violent perpetrator. And that must have been absolutely devastating for the family to stomach. Now, Nadya and Justin actually end up being offered a plea deal. This plea deal is in return for information. And plea deals can be pretty attractive if you know you're banged to rights. If you know that you're going to be stood in a court of law and you're going to have lawyers cross-examining you, and you know that your story is going to be completely deconstructed and essentially destroyed, it's going to be scary, particularly when it's quite obvious what you did. So the plea deal is offered, and it means, of course, that they'll be able to say, yes, I did A, but maybe I didn't do B, and maybe therefore the consequences won't be C. So you're kind of mitigating the damage to yourself whilst also accepting you're guilty. So Nadya ends up confessing that they had planned the murder and that the murder had indeed been premeditated. So we get to March 2021, that's when the sentencing hearings take place. Justin, he pleads guilty on the 10th, and Nadya pleaded guilty at her hearing, which was on the 31st of March. When Justin spoke at his sentencing and started to talk about the circumstances around Kenny's murder, he said, listen, it was Nadya's idea to murder Kenny, but we expect it would be Nadya's idea to murder Kenny. But this is how it should go, isn't it? Justin, yeah, I've got an idea. Yeah, I think we should murder Kenny. Nope. Nope. No. Nope. Nope. I'm just going to back out with no. I'm going to back out of the door going, no, 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 bye. Slam. That's how it should go. Maybe not with as many no's, but that's how it should go. It shouldn't be, Justin, yeah? I've got a plan, okay? I want to kill Kenny. Sure. Do you want me to get a gun? Because that's what happened. That's what happened. Essentially, he says, yeah, it was Nadya's idea to murder Kenny, so I just popped off. Just went and got myself a firearm. Could you imagine how many people would be dead if people posed ideas and we just all ran with them. Genuinely. Think about the bad ideas that people have posed in your life. The aim of being a decent human being is to challenge and question stupid or indeed lethal ideas. But Justin didn't get that memo. Justin was like, sure, no problem, let's just go and do that. So he goes and buys that firearm from his cousin, who obviously talked about it and was very scared that they might be implicated. And he bought that firearm literally just a couple of days before Kenny's body was discovered. He said that he was actually under the influence of drugs when they were putting the plan together to murder Kenny in the first place. And that once he had the gun, he actually gave Nadya the bullets for it because he thought that being in possession of a loaded weapon whilst he was on drugs wasn't actually wise. So he's saying, yeah, I wasn't really in the right mindset to actually go ahead and carry this gun with the bullets, etc. because I was like a little bit hazy. I was a little bit drugged up. But this is no defense whatsoever because he's actually saying, well, I was so drugged up that I actually needed to have a health and safety officer risk assess the situation. So I was like, Nadya, you take the gun and the ammunition. You keep it safe for me so that when I actually go about using it, I won't have made a mistake and accidentally shot myself before in this stupor. So he actually has the foresight to do that, meaning that it is premeditated and also meaning that he was able to think about logically what was safe for him to do in that moment and came up with the idea of giving her the gun and bullets to mind because he felt like he wasn't possibly in the best state of mind in that moment. So to protect him until that gun was actually needed, meaning that he was compos mentis in that situation. Now, Nadya, she, of course, is highly manipulative. So she's tricked Kenny into meeting her under the pretense of rekindling their romance. Talk about a Black Widow type scene. So she knows what's going to happen. She's luring Kenny to his death. And she's luring him to his death with his hope, which is that maybe she wants him back. I can't even begin to imagine how Kenny would have been feeling in that moment. And that is so devoid of any human compassion or empathy to take the very thing that he wanted, which was to be with somebody he was, in his mind, in love with. And for her to know that and to take that and to distort it and then to use it to destroy him, that's dark. That is deeply malevolent. And if we are to suggest the type of mindset that would do this, well, it's very psychopathic, isn't it? To actually go ahead and use the very thing that means more to him in the world in that moment, which was the idea of love with her, so that she can fake him into a position of security, so that ultimately she can execute him. That's so, so sinister. And apparently they'd actually planned to take him to one of his and Nadya's old meeting places, which was on a bridge by the river. And so they're even taking him to a place that is resonant of a relationship that he had with her. They used to go there. So this is a romantic place. Maybe this really is going to be a reconciliation. They're doing this purposefully and willfully to trick him. It's treacherous. And I mean, it's treacherous of a Macbeth level, isn't it? So this is where they're going to go, where there's this bridge on a river and it's a very secluded area, and they know, well, this is going to be a great area that we can kill Kenny because no one's going to be able to see us. So essentially we're going to be able to get away with murder, which is exactly what they want to do. Now, Justin said at this point, Nadya gave him back the bullets before she actually picked up Kenny. So now he's lying in wait. But I will also note that there is some inconsistencies in this part of my research, because some people say that he was waiting at the location. Others say actually he was in the back of Nadya's car when she met Kenny at the gas station. It's kind of irrelevant because what we know is this is premeditated, cold-blooded murder. Others suggest that Kenny actually knew that Justin would be with them. I would think that was highly unlikely. He didn't get on well with Justin, and also he's being lured there on the pretense that potentially he's going to get back with Nadya. So why on earth would it be like, oh yeah, let's get back together, but by the way, I'm bringing Justin, the guy that I'm with, because that's going to work out really well. Oh yeah, sure, I'll come, no problem. I don't see that that's an issue. You bringing your jealous, angry boyfriend to meet me, your really desperate ex who wants to be back with you. I can't see how that would ever go wrong at all. I think it's a brilliant, shall I bring a picnic? I mean, no one's going to do that. I don't believe that at all. So he wouldn't expect Justin to be there. Justin also did tell the court that although Nadya and Kenny had actually argued, it was Nadya who was really instigating the argument and who escalated things to the point of it becoming really, really heated. Of course she did. She knew what she wanted. She wanted to prove that a man would kill for her. Let's just call it out as it is. This is what we are talking about. We are talking about a woman, young and immature, a woman she may be, but nonetheless very calculating, very manipulative, and desperate to prove that men are so absolutely enamored with her, desperate for her attention, that one will arrive willingly to his death and another will take responsibility for his murder. That will prove, won't it, what an incredible human being she is, how much she is loved, that somebody would literally kill for her. And orchestrating something so deeply malevolent is rare, and particularly for somebody who's 20 years of age. Now, Justin also said, the truth is Kenny didn't attack or assault anyone. He didn't attack me. He didn't attack Nadya. So he just blows out of the water what Nadya had told the authorities. And actually, he also backed her up initially, but he said, no, it's all lies. Then he said, after we left Kenny's body, after I'd killed him, we went back because Nadya was really worried about the mobile phone. He had a mobile phone and he had apparently allowed Nadya to listen to music on it earlier. And she thought, well, maybe they'll be able to link that phone to the murder and me. So she didn't want that phone left there. So they went back because it might have fingerprints on it, and also it might have this link to her technology because she was listening to music, and that might identify that she was with him. Now, Kenny's phone was never actually found, and Justin said that they'd taken the gun and thrown that gun into a dustbin in Dalton, which was behind Big Lots, which is a furniture store. Nadya, she made no statement at her hearing. Of course she didn't. Why would Nadya, who wants to be the centre of her own attention, wish to be the centre of anybody else's? She's been found out. There's no glory now. There's no freedom now. There's just a sad recognition that her need to be so validated, even if it caused the death of someone else, has essentially totally changed and challenged the course of her life for many, many years to come. Nadya and Justin were both sentenced to life in prison. They're actually eligible for parole in 30 years' time. That means in 2050, they could potentially be released, but it's a long time and they'll have missed out on things like having families, having relationships, having freedom to be educated. They'll have missed a huge portion of their lives. They'll have lived longer in prison than they ever had in freedom. And that's if they ever get out. Because the truth is, someone like Nadya may never be considered fit to be released. Special Agent Adam Jones of the GBI, Special Agent Adam Jones of the GBI, that's the Georgia Bureau of Special Agent Adam Jones of the GBI, that's the Georgia Board of Investigation, they were involved in the case. He said that, without a doubt, Nadya played on the jealousy of Justin to hop him up to say, hey, if we're going to go and have a good relationship and love each other forever, Kenny can't be in the picture. And eventually came up with this plan to ambush and execute Kenny. He actually didn't hold back. He described Nadya as evil. He said she was playing a game of who would kill for me and had a weird, dark, romantic fantasy about murder. Apparently neither Nadya or Justin showed any remorse for killing Kenny, which is grotesque. It's disgusting. If you can't show remorse for killing an innocent human being who did nothing wrong, who by their own admission didn't fight, who didn't even start the altercation, who was guilty only of having feelings for Nadya, feelings that she didn't need to reciprocate and wouldn't have led to anything. If they can't say, yes, I'm sorry, yes, I'm accountable, they'll never be safe. If you can kill and feel no conscience for it, then you can kill again. Also, in calls from prison, these two lovebirds, Nadya and Justin, they have spoken about getting married if they get out of prison. Also, they laughed about the mess they'd gotten themselves into. So it shows you that even when confronted with the reality of their actions, i.e. spending decades in prison, they were still acting in that emotionally immature way, as if this was just a bit of a mess they got into, and oh, how still in love they are, and how maybe if they get out of prison, they'll be able to rekindle their romance and get married. But let me tell you, Justin, if ever you were so unfortunate enough to marry this woman, the chances are that that marriage would not be, shall we say, a lifelong endeavour. Because what we can tell about Nadya is that, let's say she got bored of you, well, she'd have some very creative ways to ensure that the next Mr. Right that came along may do her bidding in a very similar way to how you did her bidding. And that may mean a very short span of time that you actually end up in a relationship with this particular individual. She is absolutely the Black Widow type. And you know, there is obviously the age that we can explore and say she's 20 when this happened, she's a young woman, people change, but the constructed way that she created and thought out the murder of Kenny is utterly despicable. And yes, she may be emotionally immature on one level, but my God, she is sophisticated on another. She knows how to manipulate people to a point where they are willing to kill for her. Kenny died for the sole reason of meeting the wrong person and having loving feelings towards her. Bad love exists, and this is the absolute archetypal stereotype of what bad love looks, feels, and ends like. Let me know your thoughts, guys. See you again next time. And as ever, Wednesdays and Sundays, I'll see you again next time. Loads of love.